Hello. Amidst all the important news that's going on at the moment, the horrible situation in Syria, the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, the ongoing tensions with North Korea, the gun debate in the United States, and this winter snowy downpour we're having in the UK. One important piece of news has been somewhat sidelined. I'm not saying this had no coverage, but maybe other times it would have had bigger coverage, and that is the news that Xi Jinping of China is has brought his plan to scrap term limits into the Chinese constitution. Now, this is very important because China is very important. So, naturally, the leader of China is one of the most powerful people in the world. Xi Jinping became president in China. He became chairman of the Central Committee of the Communist Party amidst numerous other titles. In between 2012 and 2013, there was a roughly year's period by the time he consolidated all of those positions. He succeeded Hu Jintao. So he's now nearing the end of his first term. He will go for a second, and this basically means his terms are now unlimited. That is pretty concerning now. Xi Jinping 64, which in terms of Communist Party politics is not particularly old. Um, it's it's let's say an average sort of age. It's actually on the younger side of things when you consider how old certain Soviet and former Chinese leaders have been. Um, Now, an interesting side effect of this is the censors have been in overdrive to crack down on metaphors that have been used by Chinese netizens to reference this. And it's some very interesting things that they're censoring. Boarding the plane, Animal Farm, Long Live the Emperor, I Disagree. All these phrases are being blocked. I tried this on my QQ account. I typed in Long Live the Emperor. It immediately vanished and went back to my old status. I then tried it with switching the words around. Is that an algorithm? I've forgotten now. When you switch letters around to make anagram, that's the word I'm looking for. I tried an anagram using one of these. It still did come up. Um, so clearly the censors are in overdrive with this one. This is concerning um, because when you have one person having absolute power over a country of 1.3 billion people, it may be popular for a while, it may provide stability for a while, which the Communist Party will argue, but at some point, this will backfire badly. I'm not suggesting it's going to be like the 1960s, like a cultural revolution, because try as they will, the Communist Party is trying very hard to brainwash children into loving the party, loving the motherland. They're doing this from a very young age. I still think there is a lot of Chinese who are not the brainwashed ants of the 1960s, to put it rather crudely. They are more open minded and they are fully aware of what is going on here. Um, Nevertheless, there is a nationalism there as well, which means when outsiders bring it up, they're often attacked for, uh, you know, this is our internal affairs. And the irony is, they actually agree with the outside criticism. They just don't like outsiders saying it, which is interesting. But if you look at the what they're doing in Chinese social media, it's very obvious what Xi Jinping is doing. Xi Jinping is the most powerful and influential leader since Mao, and that's saying something because Deng Xiaoping was a particularly influential leader. So the current commentary would suggest that Xi Jinping is even surpassing Deng Xiaoping in terms of his influence on Chinese history. Each Chinese president has a sort of platform that they go on. In the case of Hu Jintao, it was promoting China's peaceful development. In the case of Xi Jinping, it's the Chinese dream. But mixed with this is a very clear assertive nationalism. And nationalism is always a cause for concern. If you look at what China is has been doing in the region in terms of extending its maritime territory and things like this, Um, it's not that it's unique to China, but China is a big country, so it can't be ignored. Um, from an outside perspective, I'm not so much concerned about my generation of Chinese people because I think mostly they're open minded enough to know what is happening here. But young children who are currently being brainwashed to love, um, Emperor Shi is, and I don't say that lightly, Emperor Shi, that is how he is behaving, like an old Qing dynasty emperor. Um, when you consider the personality of Chinese leaders, what's happened since the days of Mao is the personal power of presidents has gradually waned, but under Xi Jinping that has increased. So there was Mao Zedong fought, Deng Xiaoping theory, and now Xi Jinping fought, which is brought into the last party congress. Um, there was no Hu Jintao fought, there was no Jiang Zemin fought, there was no Hu Yaoping fought. That's because for a long time the focus was on collective leadership. It was still a single party system, but it was collective authoritarianism rather than focus on one individual. And there's a good reason for that. The Communist Party did not want a repeat of the mayhem that Mao unleashed when he turned the party against itself, when he turned young people against the old. I don't think that's likely to happen again, certainly not on that sort of scale. But if you look at some of the things that Xi has done, he has got rid of some of his internal opponents, ostensibly through a anti-corruption drive, an anti-graft drive. Now, no doubt that is needed, so it's not entirely a bad thing. Corruption holds a country back. Corruption is a bad thing. So tackling that in itself is not a bad thing. But politics is politics, and no doubt Xi has also been doing it to get rid of some of his opponents like Bo Xilai, whose name, by the way, is completely, you will not find it on Chinese media. Um, so it's this concentration of power around an individual. There has also been a growing personality cult. Again, I don't think it's comparable to the days of Mao, but I would compare it to Putin in Russia. I mean, you get these youth camps in Russia that promote Putinism, and something similar is developing now in China. Um, Xi is popular. I think he's genuinely popular among the Chinese people because of his anti-graft drive. But there's a difference between popularity and an extreme personality cult. And I think a lot of Chinese people, well, there's going to be people who are taken in by it, unfortunately, but there will be others who know full well what is going on here. The problem is, um, a dictator like Xi, and he is a dictator by definition, uh, stands out from a dictator like Bashar Assad or Robert Mugabe. That they are archetypal dictators. In the case of Xi Jinping, uh, he doesn't have any sort of bizarre habits. He doesn't have any sort of you don't see people groveling to his portrait. So it's more difficult to pin him down as a dictator, except that's what he is. That I think makes it harder um, to convince people that this is a problem. Xi Jinping is not Kim Jong Un. Xi Jinping is not Bashar Assad. So neither does he have an eccentric sort of personality, nor is he a brutal butcher who's raining down barrel bombs on his own people. Although I wouldn't put past any Chinese leader to try another Tiananmen Square, an event they still censor. But I think that's why people are maybe a little bit complacent about it. Time will tell. I personally feel that at some point, all strong men meet some sort of point where their authoritarianism gets seriously questioned. There has actually been big anti-Putin protests in Russia, but because so much of the Russian media is controlled by the Putin political machine, then it gets very little coverage within Russia. You'll never see RT report that. Likewise, you will never see Xinhua say anything negative about President Xi. And if you look at Chinese journalists, I don't think that they are necessarily bad people. I think many of them want to do their job. They want to do the job of a journalist to ask questions, but it's greatly restricted what they can do. That's why I believe when the foreign minister Wang Yi visited Canada and he got asked those questions about human rights, he had a tantrum because Chinese members of the Politburo are arrogant. They do feel that they are above criticism, and there's this nationalistic idea that the Middle Kingdom is special. It's better than all other countries. Now, Politburo members, for the most part, are pretty diplomatic. They know the right things to say. So when they go to other countries, they'll flatter the country. They're actually pretty good statesmen in terms of they're not crude. You know, they're not like Duterte in the Philippines or Donald Trump for that matter. They are usually polite, um, but that politeness is matched with an extreme sensitivity about defending the feelings of the Chinese people. Basically means don't criticize us because they put out this idea that the Chinese people are indistinguishable from the Politburo. And I think that's very unfortunate because some Chinese people get taken in by that and they think if an outsider is criticizing the Communist Party, that's somehow an attack on the Chinese people. So there is that very obvious nationalism in there as well. My battery's running low, so I'll leave it there. But time will tell where this goes. I personally think people should be very wary of it. Um, I don't really have any answers. If I was a Chinese citizen, I don't know. People just need to be informed, though, as to what's happening here because it is very obvious.